Imagine this. Late 1780. The American Revolution is on life support. After 5 long, brutal years, the dream of independence is fading. The Continental Army has been crushed in the South, entire forces captured. In the North, George Washington can only watch as the British occupy New York City. The money is worthless, the public is tired, and the army is on the brink of mutiny. It was from this abyss of despair that the war's most decisive moment will arise, the Yorktown Campaign. This wasn't fate. This was the result of incredible cooperation on one side and catastrophic miscalculation on the other. It's a story of brilliant strategy, clashing egos, and a series of choices that would decide the fate of a nation. This is how the American Revolution was won. As 1781 dawned, both sides knew this was the year. For the Franco-American alliance, it was now or never. The French knew they had to do more than just show up. They made a few critical decisions. First, they told their powerful West Indies fleet, led by the Comte de Grasse, to sail north and help out. But here's the clever part. They didn't give him rigid orders. He had the freedom to decide where he could be most effective. Back in America, the French General Rochambeau was told to link his army with Washington's. The stage was being set for a major move. Meanwhile, the British command was a complete mess. The top Army and Navy commanders in New York, General Clinton and Admiral Arbuthnot, hated each other. They couldn't work together, creating a power vacuum. This allowed ambitious commanders like General Cornwallis in the South to basically do whatever they wanted. This division, Allied cooperation versus British infighting, would prove fatal. Suddenly, the war's focus shifted to a place that had been relatively quiet, Virginia. In January 1781, the infamous Benedict Arnold, now a British general, led a lightning raid, even capturing the state capital, Richmond. Washington saw the danger and sent one of his best, the young Marquis de Lafayette, with 200 men to shore up Virginia's defenses. The situation escalated. A French fleet tried to trap Arnold but was intercepted by a British fleet at the Battle of Cape Henry. It was a draw, but it allowed the British to pour more troops into Virginia. Lafayette, now facing a much larger force, had to defend Richmond, arriving just hours ahead of the British. Then came the game changer. General Cornwallis, on his own initiative, marched his army north from the Carolinas. He now commanded over 7,000 men in Virginia. Lafayette, with a fraction of that, was forced into a brilliant, desperate retreat. He played a cat-and-mouse game, dodging and weaving, buying precious time while waiting for reinforcements. This gritty fight in the Virginia countryside was crucial, but the war's true destiny was being decided hundreds of miles away. While Lafayette was running for his life, Washington and Rochambeau met in Wethersfield, Connecticut. They had to pick a target. Washington was obsessed with New York City. He saw it as the head of the snake. Take New York, and the war is over. But Rochambeau had another idea. He argued that Virginia was the weak spot, the perfect place for a combined land and sea attack. They couldn't agree, so they did something brilliant. They sent a message to Admiral de Grasse in the Caribbean, laying out both options and giving him the final say. Rochambeau also slipped in a private note, nudging him towards the Chesapeake. On July 16th, Admiral de Grasse made one of the most important decisions of the war. He managed to get the Spanish to protect French interests in the Caribbean, which freed him up to take his entire fleet, 28 ships of the line, and 3,500 French soldiers north. He sent word to Washington and Rochambeau, "I'm sailing for the Chesapeake Bay. I'll be there at the end of August, but I have to leave by mid-October." The clock was ticking. De Grasse's bold move had just locked in Virginia as the final battleground. Now, a massive, coordinated movement began. 3 Allied forces were converging on a single point, Yorktown. From the north, Washington and Rochambeau's armies began their long march south. In Virginia, Lafayette continued to shadow Cornwallis. And from the Caribbean, de Grasse's fleet sailed towards the coast. The trap was closing. What was Cornwallis doing? He was getting a stream of confusing orders from his boss, General Clinton, who was spooked by the Allied armies near New York. Clinton told Cornwallis to find a deep water port to fortify. After scouting the area, Cornwallis chose a small tobacco port called Yorktown. Located on a peninsula, it was a death trap, dangerously vulnerable to a naval blockade. The naval showdown arrived in late August. A British fleet, racing up from the West Indies, got to the Chesapeake first and found it empty. They thought they'd beaten the French and sailed on to New York, completely unaware that de Grasse's massive fleet was just a few days behind, having taken a slower, more deliberate route. On August 30th, de Grasse arrived. He immediately blockaded the bay, landed his troops to reinforce Lafayette, and cut Cornwallis off from the sea. When the combined British fleet finally showed up on September 5th, they were shocked. The Battle of the Chesapeake was a disaster for the British. De Grasse hammered their ships, forcing them to limp back to New York for repairs. Naval control of the American coast now belonged to the French. Cornwallis was doomed. When Washington got the news on August 14th, he knew this was it. He instantly dropped his plans for New York. On August 19th, the Great March South began. The Allies used deception, making Clinton think they were about to attack Staten Island, then slipped away. As they marched, another small French fleet carrying the heavy siege cannons they would need sailed from Newport, dodged the British, and met up with de Grasse. The combined Allied forces were then ferried down the Chesapeake, landing near Williamsburg. Cornwallis was completely surrounded. By the end of September 1781, the siege of Yorktown began. Over 15,000 Allied soldiers encircled the town by land, while de Grasse's fleet blocked any escape by sea. Cornwallis knew he was finished. He sent a desperate message to New York. "If you cannot relieve me very soon, you must prepare to hear the worst." Then he made a final, fatal error, abandoning his outer defenses, which allowed the Allies to move their cannons even closer. The relentless Allied bombardment was overwhelming. On October 17th, Cornwallis asked for terms of surrender. The ceremony on October 19th was thick with symbolism. The defeated British Army was denied the full honors of war. Cornwallis himself claimed to be sick and sent his second-in-command, who tried to surrender to the French. He was curtly redirected to an American general, the very same general the British had humiliated at the surrender of Charleston a year earlier. As the British soldiers laid down their arms, a military band reportedly played a song called "The World Turned Upside Down." The news of the surrender sent shockwaves across the Atlantic. In London, when Prime Minister Lord North heard the news, he paced his room, exclaiming, "Oh God, it is all over." His government collapsed, and the new leaders immediately began peace talks. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris was signed, and Great Britain officially recognized the United States of America. The victory at Yorktown was a masterpiece of clockwork precision, a stark contrast to what one historian called British blundering. It was a chain of risky, brilliant, and perfectly coordinated decisions. From the French committing their fleet, to Rochambeau's strategic insight, to Washington's willingness to abandon his long-held dream of taking New York and march 400 miles, every piece fell into place. And at the heart of it all was Admiral de Grasse, whose independent, audacious choices sealed the fate of the British Army and secured American independence. It remains one of the greatest examples of Allied military cooperation in history. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this journey into history, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next video.